Welcome to the Navigator podcast. Our guest for this module is Jim Colquhoun, who's been the chief technologist for Avidex for 14 years, and before that in a similar role for several other companies. We're excited to have you transition to being the senior consultant for Navigate Management Consulting, especially with your engineering expertise. So thanks, Jim, for being part of the team.
Thanks. Looking forward to working with you a little more.
Great. You've been on standards and certification committees for a number of associations for decades, always contributing to the professionalism of the industry, for which I and thousands like me thank you. So, Jim, thanks for sharing your expertise and insights with us today, supporting Navigate Academy Module 41, the importance and impact of technical standards. So what challenges do you regularly find when working with standards and certification committees?
I think the biggest challenge that I have personally seen is that typically standards, particularly for technology standards, are supported by people who are very much interested in the science. They're very much academic. They're very much focused on the accuracy of that science. And the challenge that I see is, can we make the importance and significance of their science practical to use, keeping it within the context of we have technicians who aren't scientists who are out there doing, we have engineers that are trying to commission systems. Can we use the knowledge base of those standards effectively and most significantly efficiency to make it worth the time to invest to make those systems work well? And that can apply not only to the technical standards, but also our work practices.
Got it. Yep, exactly. Given that, what victories or accomplishments or efficiencies have you seen companies achieve using standards?
A couple of things come to mind. The first one is the success of the outcome. In other words, a predicted technical outcome that you say, this is what you asked for, Mr. Customer. Here's how we're going to solve for it, and have the solution match that because we used the standards to develop the solution that we can then predict its successful use. I think the second one is, how do we look at our practice of accomplishing that? Are we efficient, and can, from a company standpoint, can we make a better profit by being that, if using those efficiencies to develop the solution? So when do we need to invest the expensive engineering hours versus when can we use maybe something that's been already thought through carefully and applying that solution for a customer successfully?
Awesome. And again, these have to be put into companies. So what mindset is required from executive and engineering management to have this standardization occur?
I think it probably comes down to investment. It sometimes feels overwhelming to say, gee, this is how we've been doing it and it's worked and we are successful, however they measure that. And take that thinking and saying, no, there may be other ways that we can affect the solutions for our customers, whether it is a more unified approach to the engineering or maybe a more standardized process. It's a cultural shift in maybe the way that an organization has been looking at their business to say, we can do this better given an opportunity to make some changes that actually improve our performance as a business.
Got it. Right. And so oftentimes it's just the acknowledgement of we need to improve versus kind of resting on our laurels.
Well, exactly. I mean, oftentimes you find an organization, they have worked very hard to get to whatever level of business they are. And you hit that plateau of success and say, well, how do I get further? So you run into a situation where the next major step may look overwhelming. And it's then taking whatever needs to happen next in process or in the way people are looking at their problem solving to say, if we can take a step back from what we're used to, look at that picture and say, where are the places where we're not as effective or that we can do a better job? That's a significant acknowledgement that maybe they need some help from the outside, or maybe they need some different thinking than what's gotten them to where they are.
Got it. Okay. We highlighted the NSCA estimation standards as a key reference, and then moved that through to percentages. How important are tracking percentages and ratios to a company, and then how do they start?
I think they're critical. I think without knowing how you're doing on project, from project to project, or just even on an annualized basis, your utilization of labor or your efficiencies relative to back office process. If you don't know what it's costing you, how can you look at making it better? So in my mind, it really is a significant step to stop and say, well, what can we know today? And oftentimes when you look at what I used to call a project postmortem, that review after the project completed of how did we do? Everybody's afraid of that. But the information that comes out of that is highly insightful as to where did we run into roadblocks that we could overcome the next time. So gathering data from each one of those projects that you do becomes the foundation for how you can do a better job in the future. It may sound really obvious, but I don't know of many companies where they actually will invest in the time. I don't have time. I've got to run to the next job, not realizing that the short time they would spend analyzing the last job may save them hours on the current one. So it's again that plan before act. I think in this case it's at the back end, understand so that we can improve.
And I think it's key as we start to track is doing closed loop. I often see postmortems are done by operations, but we never pull in the people who are estimating to actually learn from it. So we just continue. It's kind of like, well, we didn't go back to the beginning to actually correct it. We just complained about how they're not doing it. So I think it's, I mean, I think that's critical also.
Yeah, I have long said that if we find a problem at the end of a project, it automatically, almost always points right back to the very beginning, whether it's definitional in the proposal or it's some sort of understanding about what our scope delivery is going to be. That oftentimes the problems at the end really were what appeared to be almost negligible at the beginning. Oh, we'll deal with that later, or they understand, don't they? Without being really clear in communication, either amongst ourselves or with the client, that failure at the end or a difficult problem at the end is usually a problem that was very tiny at the beginning that could have been solved.
Exactly.
So knowing that, understanding where those come from, seeing where maybe you have a gap in communication, handoffs, as you identify often, a handoff from one engineer to another or from engineering to project management. If there's anything unclear, it will come back to haunt you later.
Got it. Where do you see the future of engineering going? Like standards, roles, responsibilities?
Well, it's a challenge for smaller organizations because oftentimes they don't have the resources bigger ones do to be able to have um, staff focused on the different attributes of engineering. We've talked a little bit about this before, that there is a difference in velocity versus intensity. Velocity being sales engineering, keeping up with the account representatives and making sure that they get what they need in a timely fashion versus the intensity of working through the details. And if that's under one hat, you always have a challenge of being pulled in two different directions as an engineer. I got to keep going over here, keep new sales coming in, but I got to get the work done for the guys in the field over here, and that's more intense. That's certainly one of those big ones that a small organization can't deal with. The risk when you get to a bigger organization is the handoff. In other words, are we being clear about documentation and who knows what to do in the next step of that? So roles and responsibilities, it's really, I think, documenting and having people understand what they need to do, when they need to do it, and making sure that we hold each other accountable. So from that standpoint, the first thing is to say, can we define the responsibility of what the front end engineering or sales engineering is different from project engineering, and making that distinction of when I'm wearing one hat versus the other, even if it's the same person doing the job. So I think it's the place to start is identify the process and identify who is going to do each of those steps, and then accommodating time for those.
Got it. Well, again, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Certainly. Thank you very much.